Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to SWATH 2025, Freedom at Your Fingertips, Exploring Black Texas History in the Digital Age. This is the fourth of 5 online presentations that we have that focus on various aspects of Black Texas history and also on ways to access history. So we're looking at the 4 phases of historical production, the making of archives, the interpretation of archives, the writing of history, and the ultimate making of history. So tonight we are pleased to have Dr. George Daniels with us. He is going to be speaking about HistoryMakers, and I want to read his bio. So, George L. Daniels is an associate professor of journalism and creative media and Reese Pfeiffer Fellow in the University of Alabama's College of Communication and Information Sciences. Now, in his 22nd year on the faculty, Dr. Daniels was selected as part of the inaugural class of teaching fellows for the University of Alabama Teaching Academy. More recently, he was 2024 recipient of the Felix F. Gutierrez Clint C. Wilson II Award for Teaching Excellence and Innovation. In 2021, he was among 4 faculty in the U.S. chosen as inaugural recipients of the Global Challenges Teaching Award by the U.S. UK Fulbright Commission. Daniel serves as a master faculty fellow with the HistoryMakers. Since 2022, he's used the HistoryMakers digital archive as a central part of his journalism and communication classes at the University of Alabama, which was the first university in the Southeastern Conference to become a subscribing institution to HistoryMakers. He's eager to show others outside of his school the opportunities that come from using the HistoryMakers in researching one's family, community, church, or conducting academic research. In 2024, he published a peer-reviewed article in the Journal of Radio and Audio Media based on an oral history interview in the HistoryMakers digital archive. Before beginning his teaching career in 2003, Dr. Daniels worked as television news producer in Atlanta, Georgia, Cincinnati, Ohio, and his hometown of Richmond, Virginia. Welcome, Dr. George Daniels.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, everyone on today for the opportunity to talk about the HistoryMakers and to talk about a little bit about what we're doing at the University of Alabama using the HistoryMakers. This is a fantastic midsummer opportunity for us. I am just grateful to you, Karen, for the connection that we made a week and a half ago when we began the HistoryMakers Summer Institute in Chicago. And often those kind of summer experiences are really about relationships. And I believe I have a new friend in South Texas, and we're going to be connected for a long time. So thank you for the invitation to come tonight. I have much to share, but I also want to get to know those on the call. And as everyone is kind of coming into the room, in a few minutes, we'll take a moment and just go around the room and see who's on, where you're coming from, and what kind of role you have as an instructor. But I will go ahead and share my screen and I'll tell you a little bit more about the HistoryMakers because that is one of the things we want to start out with as we are talking about the digital archive. There is an organization behind the HistoryMakers, and the slides we prepared tonight are designed to kind of give you an overview of the organization. I'm going to hit play here. There we go. Where is our, you know what? Let me do this. My window is not set up quite right. Let me shrink it a little bit. But as we're talking about the organization, we want to also show you how the History Makers works. That's the other objective of tonight. And if you've never used the archive, you'll get a chance to see a little bit more about it tonight. Um, all of the slides that you're going to see as I'm looping through them now are going to introduce you to the organization and the platform. But the first slide is designed to tell you, hopefully you're seeing that now, the digital repository for the Black experience, that we consider the History Makers to be and the is important. There's not one like it, a digital place to report on what the Black experience is. We're talking here about what African Americans have gone through for generations. And to have that available, as this workshop is called, at your fingertips, is the magic. And even as I'm going through these slides, I also am going to get very quickly to let you hear what's in the archive, because the power of the History Makers is the hearing of the voices telling their story. The organization, though, that's behind the platform is a nonprofit based in Chicago and is in charge of what we know to be the largest collection of African American oral histories in the world. That collection sits right next to the WPA slave narratives as the two most significant efforts to capture the Black experience. And that is located at the Library of Congress. It's actually housed in Maryland. You can go to the History Makers. You can go to the Washington, D.C. area and see both of these in Maryland, but accessing them through their offices in the D.C. area. And the point here is they will forever be available. That's the thing. It's capturing the African American experience in a way that is always going to be available for a long time to come. How does one get to be a history maker? Well, he, she, or they has made some significant accomplishment in his or her life. And that may be after 78 or 90 years, and it might be after 20 years. Yes, we have history makers who are only in their 20s. The other way a person gets to be a history maker is he, she, or they is associated with a particular movement or an organization. Unfortunately, too many African Americans had already passed on when the history makers started. The first interviews were done in 1999, but in fact, there were people still around who could talk about those who are already gone. And they were associated with the particular movement or organization. So that's the second way a person gets to be a history maker. Once that person's interview is recorded, he, she, or they is introduced into one of these 15 categories that you see here. They can either be style makers, or they can be military makers, or sports makers, religion makers. In my neck of the woods, we're interested in the 457 who are part of the media makers. Those are the students who are learning in my class about journalism. That's who they're going to hear from. So these categories are really important, and we're going to show you that in just a second. Education is another area where they can be placed. But also, behind each interview, there is some biographical information and some photos that have been digitized and explained in the interview. And that is all part of this digital repository of the African American experience. And so I'm going to stop sharing those slides and go to the digital archive just to give you a sense of what you will find when you get to that archive. Um, if you are one of the subscribing institutions, and we'll talk about the subscribing institutions in a second, but the interviews are not just available for you to watch one thing after another. You can play parts of those interviews because each one is cut into stories or clips. Listen to this particular clip from the first African American woman to write a country song that was #1. People magazines type questions that management compels me to ask, and they only require short answers. Okay. The first one is, do you have a favorite food?
Yes. Cornbread madeleines. It's a food item I invented. It's corn.
Let me make sure that everybody hearing me, hearing the sound.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Bread, yellow cornbread, cooked in a madeleine mold like Proust's madeleines, because they bring me back to Detroit, Alabama when I eat them. And my little tiny shell-shaped cornbreads take me back to the skillet cornbread my grandfather made for me as a little girl.
Do you have a favorite color?
Black and white. I almost always wear black. I'm wearing a green sweater for y'all today, but I've been wearing black for about 20 years.
Do you have a favorite time of the year?
I have to say spring. I like the beginnings. There's a lot of me that's sort of Persephone-like. So I like the rebirth and the incorporation of death of winter with the hope of rebirth in spring. So maybe as I'm getting older, winter is of more interest, the time of redemption, rebirth, when things seem to be fallow but aren't. So I'm probably moving to winter.
Do you have a favorite vacation destination?
No, I am sort of beyond vacations in the sense I love being able to work. Having been a mommy most of my life, I have to defer a lot of, and a wife, a lot of the work I wanted to. I have done a lot of work, but deferred a lot of work. I've had a chance to travel to spend a lot of time in the southwest of France, and I love that. I like islands. I've been to Chile, and I've seen a lot of the world, but I now like to stay home more.
Okay. The last question is, do you have a favorite phrase or saying?
Do the hard right thing. And maybe sugared through. I like life that is sugared through, not sugared over.
And so that is an example of how we start these interviews. And I just picked Alice Randall, but there are many, many examples we could pull from the archive. This list just shows you the variety of people, from Bonnie St. John talking about smells in childhood to a journalist who recently visited our campus, one who I grew up watching on BET. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who's written an award-winning column that's syndicated. His name is Clarence Page.
How would you describe your style as a columnist? Or who did you pattern yourself after, or did you pattern yourself after anyone? Both of us do. So.
Yeah, a combination of a lot of different people. I mean, I've always admired Mark Twain, who pioneered what they call a common man's voice or whatever in literature. For all the controversies about Huckleberry Finn, the use of the N-word, I think it's a great American novel, and I have defended teaching the book in its original form, at least to high school students, if not younger. But in any case, you go from Mark Twain to Damon Runyon to don't miss Frederick Douglass. I'm just in awe of the man's command of literature, and you can see why they didn't want slaves to know how to read and write, because he showed the power of the word, and at the same time could communicate with the ordinary person with such power and effectiveness. And so I come on up to the present day. I feel like I cannot describe my style per se, but when I sit down to write, I try to put myself in that situation of being around the poker table or at the salon or wherever else, around the pool room table or whatever, just talking with friends and neighbors about the issues and try to use that voice, to have that conversation on the page that really is what people turn to opinion pages for, I believe. And so it's been, sometimes the humor, sarcastic voice is appropriate. Sometimes the very solemn voice is appropriate. Other times the call to action. But I feel like if I have any purpose, it is to give my opinion and to do it in a way that helps to analyze and make sense of the news for my audience.
So Clarence Page is another example of a history maker who is able to tell his story from childhood to present day. He's very much alive, still doing columns, and I was able to use him in my classes even before he came to our University of Alabama campus. But I wanted to get quickly to some of those examples to show you the range of people who are available in the archive. In a few minutes, I want us to get to talking about people from your state who are in the digital archive. But let me go back and do a little more introduction, because I do want to make sure you understand the organization. And that organization is most visible by these 200 institutions. And I'm going to go back to that slide. Hopefully you're seeing that there are 200 universities. This page shows the ones in your state. If you count, there are 7 current subscribing institutions in the Lone Star State. And Texas Southern, Karen, is one of them, as I'm sure you were very much excited to see. In order to be a History Maker faculty fellow, your university has to be a subscriber. And that means that the digital archive is available through your library website. Prairie View A&M, Wiley College ran out the HBCUs. And then now that they are part of the SEC, the University of Texas at Austin is also a part of the digital archive and joins us in the conference as one of the subscribing institutions. But then you also have Southern Methodist as well as University of North Texas. I share that because these are the places where faculty and students can access the archive. But on the next page, you see that there are public libraries like the Dallas Public Library, like the Houston Public Library, who also have access to the digital archive. And hopefully tonight, some of you are from these institutions or have access through your library to be able to see the History Makers digital archive. But even if you're not, you can bring this to your classroom even by using the sample clips that are available on thehistorymakers.org, on the History Makers website. How do you use this in your classroom? Well, just very quickly, I want to share that in our classes, we're able to take the History Makers content and link that content to what we're using from a textbook, or we might be sharing in a lecture. We're also helping students as they are searching the archive to develop research skills. And I want to talk a lot more about that in just a minute. Ultimately, we're after that circle in the center, greater learning, that our students are going to get a deeper experience, a richer experience because of the stories of these African Americans. I have 2 classes that have been using the digital archive, one at the University of Alabama for all of our news media majors called Journalistic Principles and Practices, where the students are doing profiles of Black journalists. They have to do one profile in the middle part of the class, and they use a second source, another history maker, in the completion of that assignment. That has really been the assignment that I have done every semester for the last couple of years. But when I became a faculty fellow, I made a commitment to redevelop or re-engineer a class where the History Makers is the center of the class. And that class for me was race, gender, and media. I went to the workshop similar to what Karen and I attended last week. And I took my learning outcomes and an understanding of the archive and redeveloped assignments and even enhanced lecture material, enhanced other kinds of learning experiences using the digital archive. That pedagogy innovation is what the fellowship that we are part of is all about. And so you see on this slide 3 assignments where the archive is a central element. And we're going to look at one of those assignments in just a minute. What that does is it allows us to teach lessons using the interviews. So on this slide, you see a lesson coming out of a school of business at Rutgers University where an entrepreneur, a franchisee of McDonald's from 2004, is able to teach students about recognizing who stakeholders are, ethical dilemmas, but also to see what the link is between ethics and ownership. And that's in a business context. Today, as I was looking at the archive as it relates to Texas, I discovered a media example, someone I didn't even know, and unfortunately has passed on. But in fact, because of the digital archive, I can teach students in race and gender about a television producer, a public affairs host, someone who worked in at least 2 different media markets and at NBC News. Her name is Rochelle Brown. And in the state of Texas, in Dallas particularly, she was known for her work in the area of community affairs. She was a longtime community affairs director at what is now the Fox affiliate in Dallas, KDFW. But she also worked on the public television side at KERA Television many, many years ago. So these are the kinds of things we can help our students to learn by using the digital archive. Now I want to switch to how do you search the digital archive. And for that, we're going to back out and we're going to pause and get a sense of who's on the call tonight. If you don't mind, let me start with Kimberly. Tell us where you're coming from, what part of Texas, and what you do. Are you a teacher, K-12? Are you a university teacher? Go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself.
Well, obviously I can't use the computer because I was trying to do the unmute. I am from Houston. I am not a teacher at all. I am by day a paralegal and at night a grad school student. I can't hear you. You're muted.
Welcome, Kim from Houston. Tell me which, you said student, where are you in grad school?
TSU.
Oh, TSU, okay.
Yes.
All right, would you by any chance know who Karen
You
Kossie-Chernyshev?
know what? I've heard that name before. I might be in her class. Yes.
All right, well, great to meet you. Meet someone else from TSU. How about Jason?
Good afternoon slash good evening. My name is Jason Wells. I'm also a grad student at TSU. I live in Houston, Texas. I used to be a teacher. I used to be an ROTC teacher a few years ago. I'm a retired Marine, so I'm definitely interested in learning about the military section of the HistoryMakers site. Let's see what else. I think that's pretty much it. Pretty much it.
All right. Well,
Yes, sir.
University of Houston Law Center, is that downtown or is that the main campus?
Oh yeah, yes, sir. That's the main campus. I'm in their pre-law program as well, so that's why you see the background in there.
Okay. I've been to that campus before, maybe 2 years ago to do a presentation. So
Okay.
it was an interesting Uber experience. I'll tell you about that one day later.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Miss Sandifer.
Okay, they will. Yes, sir. Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. As you can see, my name is Denochi Sandifer. I am from Houston, Texas. I attend Texas Southern University. This is actually my last class for the graduate program, so I'm very proud to say that. And I am a teacher. I am looking to become a teacher, but I'm also looking to explore some other opportunities with writing and editing as well. So, yes, sir.
Excellent. How about Joan?
Good afternoon. I'm sorry I don't have the video. I wasn't aware that we were going to do this. To introduce myself, I'm a former adjunct professor of music at Texas Southern University, and I met Dr. Kossie years ago, and I've kept up with her. I'm what you call a retired person who has never stopped learning. So that's why I'm on here. I do not work. I'm a member of the committee in Galveston, at Galveston Historical Foundation, the African American Heritage Committee, and I'm also on the board of Middle Passage project that's universal everywhere. But I'm never tired. I never tire of learning. Music is my main thing, I guess you would call it. But history and music go hand in hand, and of course, Black history is foremost in my life. So I am so glad to be on here. I'm a novice of I'm a different person from what you have on here. But thank you for this, Dr. Kossie, and thank you for being a part of this, Dr. Daniels.
Thank you. Thank you. How about Liza?
Hi there, I'm Liza Powers. I'm an adjunct professor in the history department at TSU, and I also work at the Bullard Center for Environmental and Climate Justice at TSU. And I'm just have learned so much from this series, and I'm so grateful for it.
Thank you for joining us. Laselli.
Okay, let me unmute. Good evening, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be joining you tonight. I am a professor of Africana Studies at Wellesley College. George, I consider to be a very dear friend and colleague. We are both Master Fellows for the HistoryMakers Digital Archive. I had the lovely the delight of meeting Dr. Kossie at the ALA conference. She's now a part of the HistoryMakers faculty fellow family, and as I said, I'm just truly happy to be in community with everyone tonight. I am in a bit of transition right now, getting ready to travel out of town. But George, it is such a heartwarming delight to see you here, and Dr. Kossie for doing the wonderful work that you're doing, and everybody on the school.
Thank you so much, Laselli. Good to hear from you, and glad you could make it, even as you're getting ready to travel.
Yeah, thank you. I wouldn't miss it.
We have a variety of backgrounds, and that's always good, but it also allows us to know what to search for as we're using the archive. And so I'm going to go back to that archive as we transition to more of our searching process and go back to the archive page, since most of you are connected to an institution that's subscribing. You can see the archive from your library webpage, and that webpage is how you authenticate that you are a part of a subscribing institution, and you get access to the full archive. Just as an alternate model, if I put in thehistorymakers.org, I get taken to the History Makers webpage, and a lot of our students will access the History Makers this way, but then they eventually have to click to the digital archive button. When you go to the webpage, you only get a sample of the material that's in the full archive. So we really encourage you to go to the archive from your library webpage. That's an important thing to stipulate first. Now let's go back to I'm going to stop sharing and make sure that we are showing you the digital archive page one more time. And it looks like we do that. Hopefully you're seeing the archive page now. I'm going to click home. Everybody see the home page?
Yes, sir.
And that is what you will see each day when you log into the archive. What you also want to note here is when you get to that home page, you're going to see whoever has a birthday that particular day. And so Thaddeus Mosley is the first person we see. And when we click on that, we go to his full interview. This is not just one clip, but it is an example of the interview page. And you are able to see on that interview page what we call metadata about each of in this case, the history maker, and how the interview went from beginning to end. So you have tape 1 all the way down to the bottom as I scroll up to 7 tapes. And normally when we talk about interviewing, you'll watch the full interview. But that is the way you get to the full interview if you're looking at who's on the homepage. If we go back to that homepage, we want to really privilege the search window, because the search window is where we're going to be able to find individual clips from interviews based on the subject matter that you are studying, teaching, or just curious about. And just to make sure I'm sharing audio, I'm going to go back and reshare. And in doing that, I am also going to do a search for my name. I'm just going to put in George and see what comes up in the digital archive. And when I put in the word George, I get 9,000 clips or stories that have the word George in the transcript. You'll notice that one of those people is someone with the same first and last name as I, and that would be the George Xavier Daniels in Chicago. He is actually a history maker, and he's the reason why whenever I talk about something I'm doing, I always use George L. But nonetheless, in this particular search, I find a lot of Georges. And so just to start out, when I'm doing searching, I want to have some idea of what I'm looking for and what's going to generate the kind of information that's best for my particular story. George Carey, I'm going to come back to in a minute. But if I back out of this search, go back to the home page, I can also look at these elements in the archive by who's speaking. That time I just did a search for George, but let's say I do a search using the individual. That would be the maker. Now I'm presented with a different page that has all of the current history makers in the archive, 2,712, who are on the maker page here, who have interviews. And I can even select these by different characteristics, such as last name, category, and we mentioned categories earlier, all the different categories. For my class, I'm going to focus on the 300 plus who are in media. Now you see just the people who are in media. And hopefully you recognize some of these individuals from their national media experience. Some of them, one of them I actually met with this morning because we're working on a research project. Some of them are still with us, others have passed on, some are still reporting, some are doing writing, but a variety of media makers come up here. We could also do business makers. So these become essentially filters. And I think we're used to using filters from time to time. We can remove them and go back to all the history makers. And for the purposes of our time today, I want us to focus on the history makers who were born in your state, which is Texas. Anybody recognize anyone on this page? Anybody from?
I know that quite a few TSU professors.
All right, which one? Take an example.
Recognize James Douglas.
James Douglas, yeah, James Douglas.
James Douglas, all right.
There he is. Mm-hmm.
So we see James Douglas is originally from Onalaska, Texas. I never heard of Onalaska. I don't know what county that's in, but is that in South Texas?
You know, let me see. I'm going to look it up. I don't know.
It's Lit Polk or Sanjak, one.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
It's more east of Houston.
Yeah, it's near Livingston.
Yeah, it's a very small town.
I was going to say it must
be. I think it's Polk County.
Yes.
Okay, great.
But if we look here, we can see his metadata tells us he has connection to law. So that helps our pre-law student who's online. And he's also an educator. And if we scroll down, we'll see, I'm certain, a discussion about his connection to Texas Southern. Here we go. In tape 3, he talks about his work at Texas Southern, and we can go to that particular area to get to that part of the interview. So this allows us to consume the interview by the person who is being interviewed. What this does not do as well is get to the subject matter that we're searching for as easily. So I recommend using this strategy when we're looking to focus on one person, as we do in my assignment that we have in my journalism class. But if we go back to that home page and we just put in Texas, we get a very different outcome. Because now we're not looking at people who were born in Texas. We're looking at any interesting situation where the word Texas was used. So even the first clip is from Henry Brown, who talks about the history of Texas Southern. Let's just see what he has to say about Texas Southern. I'm hoping that this one you'll be able to hear very well.
You were discharged in what year was it?
53.
Okay. And you came right back to Houston?
That's where family was located.
Okay. So did you go back to college immediately?
Yes. Went back to Texas Southern. I didn't go to Xavier. Finished up over at Texas Southern.
Texas Southern is a black college here in public supported in Houston.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And it was I mentioned Dr. Carruthers when we first came in here. I think he went to school there, I know.
Yeah.
But he said it was the Negro University of Southern Texas.
No, what
time?
happened is
Or
it
what
goes back to Hema Sweat.
Okay.
Hema Sweat was a postal carrier. And Hema Sweat applied to attend the University of Texas Law School. And he was refused. And he took it to court, and it eventually ended up in the Supreme Court, where Thurgood Marshall helped to make that ruling final. But anyway, in the compromise that was made, they said, okay, Hema, we're going to let you in to the University of Texas, which they did. But they dedicated one classroom for him, nobody else. He was in his class all by himself. And obviously he flunked. Flunked out of that class. But in the meantime, the suit wasn't dropped, and it was carried through. And as a part of the overall settlement, Texas Southern University was dedicated.
I think it was a law school.
Yeah.
They dedicated a law school, the Thurgood Marshall Law School.
Yeah. But the law school was named later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you get a history of Texas Southern. Honestly, before then, I had not heard the story of that particular school. And I know about TSU as a graduate of an HBCU myself. But Mr. Brown, Professor Brown, gives us details that we would not hear unless we read or heard that from maybe another person who knows the history of the institution. Now, remember what my search term was? Anybody know? What was it? It's Texas. That's not very precise. Suppose I put Texas Southern. Theoretically, that should give me a little bit more results. And you can see there that we dropped down to 485 stories. But Mr. Brown, Professor Brown, comes up again. But then we have Bobby Wilson. Anybody know Bobby Wilson? Heard of Bobby Wilson? That name ring a bell? All right. Only
I wrote the names of several TSU professors, long-term people in the chat. Alvia Wardlaw, she's there. Okay. Marlene Petrie, Robert Bullard, Bobby Wilson, and there are about 44 TSU professors in there.
Wow, excellent, excellent. So see, there's a lot about Texas Southern in the digital archive, and you can take that and build it out many ways. You could build it into a lesson about the history of the institution if you're teaching that in your classes, or you can get the students engaged in learning about their institution. And that, I think, is really, really important. I'm going to post in the chat an assignment that we use in the History Makers because it is a good way for people to find what their connection is to the digital archive. And it's called Finding Yourself in the Digital Archive. Hopefully you see the Word file that I just placed in the chat. That is an assignment that gets students searching the archive with intention. And the idea is when they go to the archive, they can find some personal connection, no matter where they're from, no matter what institution they're working in, no matter their racial background, there's some personal connection. And so at Texas Southern, if a student puts in Texas Southern, you see the kinds of things that you'll be able to find in the digital archive. And if we have more time tonight, we let you practice that assignment. But the key is the intentional search. What I want to shift to before we open it up for some questions is what else we can learn about Texas in the digital archive. And to do that, we're going to use a playlist. Let me go back to the archive and show you, as you're searching, how you can save the things that you're finding. And I'm going to share again. You'll notice at the top in the menu, there is a item in the menu called My Clips. As you find clips that you see in the archive that you like, you can simply, as we did with Professor Brown, add that to the clips that you're going to be able to access later. And they're called My Clips. Now we have that particular clip. We can go back to the home page. We can do a search for Texas Southern again. Now this time, notice I didn't put Texas Southern in quotes. So I picked up other stories that have the words Texas and Southern. But once again, Mr. Brown, Professor Brown comes up. Gloria Scott might be one I also want to save because of what she's sharing. And then I can scroll and I can go over to other pages and find additional clips that are worth saving because they help. Ray Wilson, I think, was mentioned earlier. Let's save his clip. And all of a sudden, I have 3 clips that I can use. I can go back to later. This is a really, really important tool to have when you're planning your classes because you want to go through the archive and find the best list of clips that will help you to convey whatever the lesson is you want to convey. But for the students and for the Finding Yourself assignment, you'll want to have some examples of how you are connected to the archive. And that's really, really important. But what I want to do next is go to a list of clips that I have already developed. We call that a playlist. And this is based on what I found about different communities in the state of Texas. So I want to copy my list, which I've just done. I want to clear out this particular set of clips, and I'm going to load a new playlist, which is a link to the list that I earlier had. Click submit. And these are 8 stories or 8 clips that are related to Texas. Some of them are related to media, but one in particular is related to Houston. And since most of you are from Houston, I want to start with a person who is known outside of Houston because of his service at a national level. He later became the mayor of Houston, but he also worked at Rice University, which is in Houston. And I'm talking about former police chief Lee Brown. Hopefully that name rings a bell. His experience when he became a police chief in Houston was not necessarily very positive, at least starting out.
What was your reception like in the Houston Police Department and in the community?
I might add that I also discussed this with my family. My wife at the time, before she passed away, her name was Yvonne. She never married for 34 years. And so we discussed, like every move, I would talk to the family, and there was no family opposition to it. Well, I think it would be safe to say that I was not greeted with open arms by the police officers. Probably today, if a police officer was on the force at the time, they can tell you exactly what they were doing when it was announced that I was going to be the next chief. I had one of the officers talk to me, who was out at the police academy at that time. And when he said some officer broke into the classroom, not burst into the classroom and told the instructor, "You know what that mayor's done? She's hired a nigger to be the new police chief." And that was kind of the reception I received internal to the department.
This sounds like Blazing Saddles.
Well, I thought of Blazing Saddles when I was the sheriff, because one of the reporters asked me, had I seen the movie Blazing Saddles? I didn't know at the time because I had not seen the movie. But I think it was such a significant, really shock to the police department that everyone who was on the department at the time could remember exactly what they were doing. So I say there was no open arms in the police department when I came here.
So that gives you a sense of his reflection of that particular event of his life. And that is one of the clips that I saved. Again, I've heard of Lee Brown back when he was serving in Washington. If you go to his interview, you will see more about his work outside of Houston. But also, there is a Houston mayor story that has to do with his experience serving multiple terms. And he talks about his decision to run for mayor in this particular clip. And I'll play just a little bit of this to give you a sense of that phase of his life.
But after Clinton got elected, he asked me to join his administration as the drug czar. And I did that and went to Washington.
This is 93 or so, not 92 or 3.
He took office in 93. And I went there in 93. Okay. I went a little later. He took office in January. I went there in April.
Okay.
And so I served as a member of his cabinet, one of 5 African-American members of his cabinet, which is the most you've ever had in anyone's cabinet. He said he wanted his cabinet to look like America, and he did that with Hispanics, women, and African-Americans. I did that for a couple of years, and decided to, after people had asked me to run for mayor of Houston, I'd always said no. Even when I was police chief, I was a very popular police chief. When they do polling, my numbers were higher than the mayor and all of that. So I'd always said no. When I was here as the police chief, they asked me to run. I said no for 2 reasons. Number one, I had no desire to be an elected official. Number two, I'd have to run against the person who hired me. And I think that would be unethical to do that, so I didn't. When I went to New York, my friends, when they came there, when I came home to Houston, they'd ask me to run. I'd say no. When I went to D.C., that continued. And finally, I started giving careful consideration to it. We held some meetings here, we did some polling, and all indications were that an African American could get elected. And then they looked at the most electable one, that was me, because I'd been the police chief, people knew me, and I'd been successful as the police chief. And so, that being the case, I did make a decision to run. So I came back to Houston and took the appointments at Rice University as a senior scholar at the Baker Institute, as a professor in the sociology department. And then in '97, I resigned when I announced my candidacy for mayor, and won the race in December after a runoff in December of '97, took over January the 2nd of '98, served my 3 terms, 3 2-year terms, because the terms in Houston are 2 years, and the maximum you can do because of term limits would be 3 years. I did 6 years, and then after leaving in 2004, this year, went back to Rice as a visiting scholar in the School of Social Sciences.
So that is an interesting story. But if I did a search for Houston mayor, would I find anybody else in the digital archive who has been a Houston mayor? And I just did that live. And look who comes up. Anybody recognize this guy?
Yes, sir, definitely.
All right.
Yes.
So he was asked about his first campaign for mayor of Houston.
Now, did you stay in the state legislature for? Are you still in? The state?
I'm currently
okay.
currently in the Texas House.
That's what I thought.
Right.
But you left briefly at one time, right? Or you never did?
I ran for mayor in '91.
Okay.
Didn't win, but I stayed in the Texas House, and then I ran for mayor in 2003 again. Didn't win, but I continued to remain in the Texas House. So I've been in the Texas House continuously for 23 years.
Okay. All right. That's good. All right.
Now, I stopped that because, and I'm going to stop sharing. We all know that was part of the story of Sylvester Turner, right? I must share with you that the last time I was in Houston, beyond just passing through Houston Hobby Airport, was in December of 2024. And it was for the 100 Black Men of America's Leadership Summit. I'm a part of the 100 Black Men chapter here in Tuscaloosa. And Mayor Turner, former Mayor Turner at that time, was one of our keynote speakers for the conference. And at that time, I remember him being at the conference, but also being very cold in Houston. It doesn't get cold in Houston very often. At least I didn't think it did, but it was cold that weekend. But he was about to join the U.S. Congress as Congressman-elect from Houston to succeed the late Sheila Jackson Lee, if I'm correct on that. Unfortunately, former Mayor Turner has passed on, but his story, at least in his early years, is a part of the digital archive. And I wanted to share that because we do have many history makers who have been interviewed and they leave us too soon. But the value of the archive is they are still able to have their story available to so many others. And just from that clip, what we learn is you have to try again. You don't always win the first time. And that can have an amazing impact on our students when they're learning about what it takes to get to that point. What does it take to get to be the mayor of Houston? How many years did he serve in the Texas legislature? That's history in Texas. That's Black history in Texas. That's American history. Um, Mr. Turner was a key figure in the response to many natural disasters that were national stories, and he was in the spotlight. And so to hear what he was like in his early years is only available to us because we can see the interview in the digital archive. And so I just wanted to share that example as we open it up for questions, just to show you how powerful the archive is. Not only can you find yourself, if we go back to that playlist I showed earlier, there are many examples from the Dallas area. I've done some research involving those at Texas Tech, and I'm looking for what I can learn about African Americans in the Lubbock area, and African Americans in the Austin area, and African Americans in the San Antonio area. All of those stories can be found in the digital archives. And stories you didn't know about can be found in the digital archive. So I think it's good now. We've been talking for more than 30 minutes to pause and let's take some questions about how we can use this resource in our teaching, our learning, and our research. Who wants to go first? Okay, Mr. Sanford.
Oh, yes, sir. Just out of curiosity, I wanted to know, since the whole entire organization of the History Makers focuses on preserving the history of people of African descent in America, I wanted to know if there was essentially how can I say it, a collection of vintage archives, not interviews necessarily done by the History Makers, but has the organization gotten their hands on any interviews from, let's say, people from the early 1900s, doctors, lawyers, judges, or just anyone, any person of African descent in this country who may have been formerly enslaved or their parents informally enslaved? Is there anything like that attached to the History Makers?
There's content in the archive that's talked about that goes back to the late 1800s, but I'm not aware of any interviews from that time period. What we have focused on, and Juliana Richardson, who is the founder and CEO, was really focusing on capturing the 20th century experience. What you see, though, is when you interview those people from the 20th century, many of them talk about what happened in the early years of the 20th century. And when they share their images or their other archival material, everyone who's interviewed is asked to bring at least 7 or 8 photos. They will talk about what happened in those years in the early part of the century.
Okay, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Got it.
Yes, and to add to what George just shared with you there, and what you were alluding to there, the earliest recollection in the archive is this was made reference to the 1700s. And then you also have to bear in mind, as I say, it is real history through the Black experience, the Black American experience. You also have presence of Afro-Caribbean heritage in the archive and talking about their time on the continent or in Europe and so on and so forth. So it's very extensive and deep in that way.
Also wanted to mention that you can search for slavery and memory, because a lot of the people in the archive, I was surprised at how many interviews contain those phrases where people were remembering what someone told them, about slavery. So you can still investigate it from that standpoint.
Absolutely. Great question.
So I know you said that if your school, I guess, supports or funds or registers, they could access the account. So other than those ways, can somebody just not pay to access the account, like an individual?
You can have an individual subscription, and if you go to thehistorymakers.org, there is a model for being an individual subscriber. I think $30 a month or $300 a year is a way for you to become an individual subscriber. But we recommend in getting a local library to do that, so you can go through the library. And of course, if you are connected in any way to one of the university subscribers, you can go to their library and use it that way.
Yes. Different different universities have ways that you can access still as a guest, right? You may have to be there physically, but some may have remote possibilities. But it's just a question of finding out what each library, what their borrowing privileges are. I think there's a TechShare card that you can get as a graduate student, those of you who are in graduate school, which allows you to use the repositories of different libraries. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, and George could possibly and Dr. Daniels and Dr. Kossie could possibly provide you with a list of the subscribing institutions, and on that list you would see the libraries that are linked to the archive.
Yes, we did go over that earlier.
Right, I may have missed that. Yeah, so if
7 in Texas, and then the local library in Houston also has one.
Right, yeah, I came in after that. So, thank you, George.
Next question.
I just want to add, as a historian, just how powerful having access to right at 3,000 interviews is. And I just want to share a personal story of my dissertation project, which was on African American Pentecostals in Texas. There was nothing in any regional archives. So I had to go out and physically interview people on my own. Okay, which meant I had to create my own archival material for my dissertation project. All right. My dissertation was finished in 1998. All of the people that I interviewed, most of them, I'll say, I can only think of one of the ministers I interviewed who's still alive. Everybody else is dead. So 1999, Juliana Richardson came up with the idea of creating the History Makers. Okay. And now she has right at 3,000 interviews. When I type in Pentecostal now, about 400 interviews pop up. So when I think of how hard it was for me to collect that data, you know, I had to go through the emotional. Some of the people were shy about sharing, you know, and I would hear people say all the time, you know, we're not in the history books. It's like, well, you got to help us put you in there through an interview, a survey, or something. Okay.
Yes.
And so I know firsthand just how hard it used to be. So I try to express that as a historian, what a treasure it is to have the people's voices too, along with the text.
Yes.
So you can read the text, but then you can listen and hear their inflection, which is also very important. So I'm totally sold on the significance of the archive. But I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to serve as a fellow, and my master teacher was Laselli, and I also was exposed to George when he would give presentations in the larger session. So I invited him because I wanted him to be able to talk to you more specifically about how to use the archive. As my students will tell you, they have done a History Makers exercise, okay, at the beginning of our short semester, and I have used it, but what we're aiming for is deep usage, and that will come with more structured um, exercises that help you to dig even more deeply into the archive. But just know that it is unquestionably the most replete archive of African American voices for the 20th century. You're not going to find anything larger. You're just not going to. Now, the African American Research Center in Houston does have some interviews. In fact, they have the interview of Dr. Thomas Freeman, who was at Texas Southern. He's not in History Makers, but he is in the Houston Archive. The University of Houston also has one that's called Bearing Witness, and they interviewed African American doctors, medical doctors. You can listen to that, and that's great, but none is as replete, okay, and is as large as the History Makers Archive. It is immeasurably fabulous for those who are doing African American history in any state, and in particular in Texas. Last thing I'll say, also, the father of Juneteenth is in there, Al Edwards. The Juneteenth celebration, the state holiday, Al Edwards started that. And you know, now we know it's a national holiday thanks to Opal Lee's input. But there are a lot of very significant African American leaders from Texas who are in the archive.
Yes. Yes.
So those of you who are going to be lawyers, one other thing, those who are going to be lawyers, you can search. It would be great for you to go and pull up stories from people who are in the legal profession, where they talk to you about all aspects of their experience as lawyers. Because some of the stories they share are the kinds of stories that you might not hear them share, and let's say on a different platform. You know, if it was on 60 Minutes, there are certain things that they might not share that you will find that they may have shared in these more intimate interviews with history makers. That's what I love about it too. You get more intimate stories because the interview process, I think, is how many hours, George? 6?
5-6 hours. Yeah.
They interview these people for 5 or 6 hours. Okay. And they also have very important ethical standards behind that as well. And George can speak to that if he wishes. But I just wanted him to come and share more details so that you will really understand too just how important the archive is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
Question,
think,
Professor.
yes.
all the people that you interviewed though, have you added those to the archive?
That's a process that takes sometimes several months. Not sometimes, it always takes several months. The ones that you are able to access right now don't include the ones that have been interviewed over the last few months. It takes time to go through and get those cut and indexed and processed. So you may see some states are not in there at the moment, but they will eventually land in there. That is probably, I'm thinking, 6 or 8 month process once a person has been interviewed. And there are always more interviews being done.
Yeah, so as George is giving his presentation, and every day, there's opportunity for an interview to be done. We're getting ready to head to Martha's Vineyard, and that is a big initiative to gather place where we gather interviews. I think we have to finish up Kimberly Crenshaw and a few others. So yeah, it's an ongoing process.
Oh, I'd like to also, George, can you speak briefly to um, students being able to be involved in the pedagogical uh, initiative? I don't know if you were going to address that.
Absolutely. Well, I think the key is to recognize that the learning that you're doing is coming in the searching and in the writing of what you find in that search. Um, we have a program called the Student Ambassadors Program, and that is where you as a student can apply to represent your institution for a school year and talk about the history makers in similar ways that I'm doing to get more people to use the archive, to show them how the archive is a valuable resource. And it started out as just students from HBCUs, but in the last 2 years, we have students from all different types of institutions who are part of that ambassador program. They have to show us, one, what kind of outreach plan they can develop for the upcoming school year. They also have to take content from the archive and write blog posts using the archive to show people regularly how the information in the archive can be relevant to their everyday life, from what's going on in the news to a topic that might be a little bit less familiar to people. All of that is through the digital archive. And so we'll have applications in the spring semester for the 2026-2027 student ambassadors. And if you're interested in being a formal part of the organization, beyond just being a user, I would encourage you to apply. I don't believe we have a Texas Southern ambassador in this year's group, but we certainly could for 26-27.
Sorry, I just had a quick question on that. I just pulled it up on the site, so we should just pretty much just stay abreast through the site as far as updates for
Yeah.
applying.
Yeah,
Okay.
applications usually come out around February for the next year, and we have an interview process. It's always great if you've been using the archive on your campus because that's going to be what you'll draw on and put in your application together.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, that is all that I have. I can certainly share more, but I wanted to really privilege your questions and also be cognizant of your time. Is late in the evening, even the Central Time Zone. So, thank you very much for the opportunity to come share tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for such an insightful presentation, George, and Karen, for putting together such a wonderful initiative. Freedom at your fingertips. It was such an enriching night, and as I said, I couldn't miss it. So thank you. This brings me great joy.
I want to thank everyone who came tonight. This is really informative. We have one more. We have one more presentation that that will be given by someone from the African American Research Center in Houston, Texas. She's an archivist, and she will be talking to us about their collection. This center is part of the Houston Public Library, which, according to the search that I did, they do have history makers as well. The the Houston Public Library System is a subscriber to HistoryMakers, and that's good. But she's going to be talking to us about their repository. So thank you again. Thanks for everyone. Thank you, Dr. Daniels, for sharing with us. If there are no more questions or comments, we will say good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.